This week we'll be talking about the last stage of the helping relationship, which is termination, and also about getting ready to end your internship or field experience. So I hope by the end of this lecture and this week's course module that you'll be able to apply agency policies and accepted practice guidelines to successfully terminate client and administrative work at your internships. So let's start out with the question, what is termination? What do we mean when we say termination or terminating a client? So termination is the final stage of the helping relationship. It's the end. It marks the end of our therapeutic alliance with the client. And this termination stage can be as important as the initial stage of the helping relationship. It's the last interaction that we will have with the client as their counselor. In fact, for some clients, it's the most profoundly healing, meaningful, transformative phase of the helping process. And this is because many our clients don't have a good history with endings. And one of the gifts that we can give to them is to model a successful and mutually beneficial ending process. We're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. So what are the different types of terminations we have with clients? Well, there's forced termination, and this is the kind of termination that happens before the goals of the helping process have been met. It may be due to the closure of a program, the client moving away or switching to another program, or it may be, which is relevant to us, forced termination brought about by the limited time of an internship. So this forced termination is termination with you as their worker, but not necessarily with the agency. So the challenging part about a forced termination is it doesn't coincide with the client's needs. And in an internship especially, which is of a limited duration, sometimes things are just getting started in terms of trust and in terms of working through your intervention with the client. And because you're leaving the agency, often in your internship, there's no opportunity for the client to return to you unless you happen to get hired back by the agency. Then there are client-initiated terminations, and this can be a positive termination when the client feels that their goals have been met, when their symptoms have been reduced or eliminated, when they feel like the services have been successful. A negative client-initiated termination is when the client is uncomfortable or unhappy with their counselor or unable to engage, or sometimes when the helper does not do what the client wants them to do. And this can result in the client terminating services. And then there's sort of the general termination of services by the human services worker. And this, again, can also be a positive thing when it appears the client's goals have been met, when the symptoms are reduced or eliminated, when the insights and skills are gained for the client to manage their own problems. And while the termination is initiated by the human services worker, it is often in agreement or congruence with the client. Sometimes services are terminated by the human services worker because they don't have the expertise to treat the client problem. Maybe when you started with the client, there was something that you could help them with, but then the client presents with a situation where you are just not equipped to help them, and then you need to refer them on to someone else. There's also situations where there's a conflict of interest, or the client breaks the rules of the agency in some way, where you are not able to ethically work with the client. So what are the different ways that clients react to termination? And I would say that these are very individual based on the client's history with endings, on their culture, and on other factors such as their history with the agency, where the client is in the course of their treatment, what their diagnosis is, etc. But there's also very common things that you can anticipate. It's possible that the clients will go through some or all the stages of grief, depending on how long you've worked together and how strong your therapeutic alliance is. They may be in denial about it. They may be very angry with you. They may try to bargain with you. Can't we just continue on after you leave the agency? They may be very sad. They may come to accept that you are leaving, depending on how you handle the whole termination process. They may relapse or regress in their progress. They may try to avoid the whole thing. They may not return for your last meeting or any sort of ending. They may feel abandoned. They may increase their demands on you while you're still there. They may be afraid or resistant or anxious or indifferent. All of these reactions may be problematic, but for some clients, termination will just be fine. They have finished the work you set out to do together, or they're okay with transferring to a new worker or a new agency or a new service. They are ready, and you have helped them to get ready. And that's some of what we're going to talk about a little bit later, how you can help a client to be ready. Now, what about your own reactions to termination? Workers can feel guilt for abandoning their clients. They can feel responsibility for not being there to help their clients. They can be frustrated that they're not able to finish. They can have a feeling of omnipotence. No one else can help me or understand this client like I do. Or impotence. I have not been here long enough to make a difference with this client. They can feel sad. Can feel relieved, especially if you're working with a very difficult client. Reluctant, ambivalent, or excited about what's next, and satisfied with the work that you've done with the client. So what's really important in working with your clients in regards to termination is to plan ahead. You should be introducing the idea of termination from the very beginning, introducing yourself as an intern, saying how long you're going to be at the agency, and making sure throughout the time that you meet with the client that they're aware that you are not going to be there forever. And as you get closer to the end, getting very clear that the end is near. So 3 or 4 weeks before your final meeting, you really want the client to be clear that that will be when the final meeting is. You can help to practice termination with your clients. So if you took a break during the first quarter, between the first and second quarter, you could have the client also be on a break from you and be building their coping skills and previewing kind of what termination looks like. I think it's also really important to anticipate what sort of challenges your clients might have and who might have particular difficulty based on your work with them and on their history. And that means exploring clients' history with endings so that you have a sense of how they've responded to endings in the past. And then with your supervisor, also exploring your own history with endings and whether you're going to have some particular challenges depending on the client. You want to use your supervision meetings to strategize different termination scenarios and also how you might transfer clients on to other workers. So with individual clients, for your termination process, you're going to want to review both the process of the intervention and the progress that they've made. So what was their experience like working with you? What tools and skills and insights and resources did they acquire while you were working together? What progress did they make? Explore their feelings and continue to monitor your own feelings. Help the client to prepare for future challenges. Make specific plans with the client. And if there's some unresolved issues that the client still needs to work on, refer them to the appropriate person. And also help them, hopefully you have been helping them to build their support system and strengthen their support system outside of your agency. And you can continue to think about that in the last few meetings with the client. You want to refer the client or transfer them to someone else if that seems appropriate. And you might prepare a transfer summary which includes the client's history, their current issues, and future plans. You'll want to, if possible, introduce the client in person to the new worker because that will ensure a much smoother transition. Ask the client to give meaningful feedback and evaluation of the work that you've done together. And then have some kind of ritual for ending your time together. Don't just say, see you later, let's keep in touch, but make it clear that this is goodbye. and that there's some token of your work together that you might give to them, some summary of how you felt about working with them, your appreciation for the work they did, for what you learned in working with them, what you admire about them, what their strengths are, end things on that sort of positive note. And it's not really a good idea to promise any post-termination contact. You really want to be clear that this is an ending. Was it different when you're working with groups? How do you ensure an effective ending if you're leading some kind of education group or support group? Well, for one thing, towards the end of a group experience, you as the leader will be taking a more active and directive role as the group ends, just as you did at the beginning of the group. You want to allow the group activity to fade, so don't bring up new topics or new projects towards the end, but just continue to work on and wrap up the things that you've been working on together. You want to have a review of the history of the group and reinforce the progress and accomplishments just as you would with an individual client. Allow the members to process their feelings with each other and with you. And also make sure the clients know that you're feeling sad about the ending of the group, but also perhaps excited at how much work has been done. Review how the members can incorporate the gains they've made, and also help them to think through what future problems they might have and how they can address them. Again, you want feedback from the group so that you can improve future groups that you run. And then you'll want to provide clients with additional resources or referrals, referring them to a new group or if they need specific individual referrals. And again, a goodbye ritual can be very important. Some kind of ceremony with gratitude or appreciation exercises. I think the picture here shows some kind of exercise using yarn where you throw it back and forth and weave a web that shows how connected we all are and can lead to talking about how much we each have gotten from the group. Now, if you are doing administrative tasks as part of your internship, you also need to end those appropriately. So you should complete any projects or reports if you can. Get feedback and suggestions for next steps from your supervisor, whoever you've been working with on these. Prepare some kind of summary of the work if something needs to be transferred onto somebody else. Terminate relationships with stakeholders, like if you're working with a community group or the staff members that you've been working closely with on these projects. Take time to reflect and evaluate on the work that you did with your supervisor, and find a way to say thank you in a meaningful way and goodbye to the people at your internship. And particularly with your supervisor. Hopefully you've had a great relationship with your supervisor and that you've learned a lot. You want to acknowledge that when you're saying goodbye. Acknowledge your feelings related to the ending and any gratitude you might have for how they've supported you. Review your progress, how well you've grown in the course of your internship. Also provide feedback about your experience at the agency. And hopefully you'll be getting feedback from your supervisor. That we have a whole evaluation process for that with forms that you and your supervisor both fill out and talk about at a meeting. Express your gratitude and say goodbye. Now sometimes you will continue in a relationship with your supervisor. They may become a mentor to you, or a future colleague, or a future supervisor, or even your future employee. One of my former practicum instructors called me a few years after I graduated to ask me for helping them to find a job. So it's interesting how things end up. Fortunately, I really liked that person, and I was able to make some recommendations. So on the discussion board this week, we have some questions related to termination, talking about what your emotions are, how prepared you and your clients and colleagues are for your ending of the internship, and then any challenges you might anticipate. So the reason we're talking about this is because we want your clients to be prepared for your departure and to be taken care of after you leave. And we want you to have tied things up well at your agency, so that our agencies are willing to take more students, and so that you also get a time to reflect on and process what you accomplished in your internship.